All right, everyone, welcome back to our 12th episode of Midnight Magic Musings. I am your host, I am your tour guide, the Lord Cephas. I am joined by less of the Earl of Florida than we've seen previously. Earl, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and every Thursday it is planning to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women.
I absolutely appreciate that you started our broadcast with a Conan the Barbarian reference. Always appreciated because, well, we're of that age where that kind of stuff makes sense to us. Well, we want to welcome everybody into the show. Just to give you a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This particular weekend, there will not be a Combat One Wrestling podcast as there's no pay-per-view. But next week, the Earl of Florida will be flying solo as he will host our Combat One Wrestling podcast, reviewing the Elimination Chamber. That will be next Saturday night. He'll be handling that as I'm off with some Lord duties with the family, things I need to do. Earl, you got that under control?
I believe I might have a trick or two up my sleeve, and I've got two sleeves, so that's a plus side there. But before that, don't forget that next Thursday will be another Midnight Magic Musings right
That,
here.
that's absolutely right. We'll be coming to you same time, same channel. You'll be able to get our weirdness, our machinations will be on display for you next Thursday night as well. We may have one or two shows in between. A couple of realms of reality may drop between now and then, just to reward the explosion in growth we've had in people liking our page, subscribing, leaving comments. We really appreciate it. So we have a few extra perks this week for you fans at home. So we, again, appreciate your support. Like, subscribe, share the channel out, leave a comment before you head out today. Just let us know what you think. If you like it, let us know. If you don't like it, still let us know. We'll still take the comment. We still appreciate it. All right, Earl, you ready to dive into this week's stuff?
Absolutely, like a big boy in a no diving shallow pool. That hurts. Bad memories.
Yeah, there's just visuals I cannot get out of my head with that. Thank you for completely ruining the rest of the broadcast. Now, we want to lead off this week with something I thought was very, very interesting, and that is simply this. Deadline released a report that Yellowstone was facing potential cancellation. And I know that sounds incredibly odd since it's one of the most popular franchises and programs both on linear television, on Paramount Network, and on Paramount Plus. Obviously, it had a huge following because of the 4 seasons on Peacock, where people were able to catch up with that. So it has become a cultural phenomenon, like really none other with that type of genre in the world in which we live. But apparently, there are some issues behind the scenes, some issues apparently with their lead star, Kevin Costner. Earl, you want to talk about that?
Yes. Sadly, he has passed on. Oh wait, no, that's not what happened.
You literally you do no show prep, do you?
This is a show. Anyway, so Kevin Costner is looking to narrow his work hours for the latter half of the season he's in. So typically, uh, it can go anywhere from 4 to 10 months, depending on the series and depending on the filming, the location, issues like that, how many episodes you're going to do, how long each episode is for most series. Well, Mr. Costner has requested that his film time be down to about 2 weeks worth of business days for what, 5 or 6 episodes, which is half a season for them, I believe.
So you're talking about literally 10 full days of work.
Yeah. And we know that it usually takes what at a minimum of a week per episode, and that's if everything goes right, because uh, it's not like we're watching it and it's an hour long. You have to do scene prep, you have to do practice, people have to learn the lines, you have to get the lighting right, you have to get where they're going to stand so the camera's angles right, and then you have to do directing with how you're going to react, how the lines can be said, and there's a lot of things that go along with this, and especially with them, they have to follow the guidelines that involve kids, animals, the lighting. Is it morning? Well, we can't film it because it's noon now, and the consistency, it can't go from, oh, it's 10 o'clock filming now to it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon to it's 10 o'clock now to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's a lot of things that go into filming, even smaller singular scenes than just it was an hour. We can film that in 2 hours and be done with that episode. It doesn't quite work that way.
No, and I think it's interesting to knock it down to 10 full days. One of the other things that came from that deadline report is that this has caused major issues for the director, for the creator, for the writer, Taylor Sheridan, who basically has built the Sheridan verse on Paramount Plus with Yellowstone, previously at 1883, now 1923, which was renewed for a second season. And then the talk has become, hey, we'll have a series in 1943 and a series in 1963. Some of the things being discussed, how the Dutton family handled each particular series of time here in the United States. So it's not going away. In fact, they don't want to cancel the show and to be done with it. But here's the problem that they have. Not only is it causing issues for the director, for the writer, it's causing issues for the network, because they want to get these episodes out within a certain period of time, because you always want to strike while the iron is hot. Those are issues. But then, another report came out that a lot of the stars, the co-stars, that's causing them a lot of issues and a lot of problems. And it makes a great deal of sense. Why does this person get 10 shooting days when, as you said, I have to shoot for the next 4 months to 10 months? That means that's 4 to 10 months away from my family. Now, some of the actors and actors on the show have bought places out there so that they can be closer. They can bring their family out there. But it's still a major commitment to film that kind of show in that kind of environment, because you said you have lighting issues. One more that you didn't mention, that is the weather that they have to deal with. You have a finite amount of time where the weather's really, really good and can be shot. Otherwise, you have snow on the ground. It's just too darn cold. And remember, in this season, part of the deal of moving their cattle is because it was so cold, they weren't going to make it through the winter. Sorry, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the first half of the newest season, that was the idea. And so you can't really shoot with snow. There are certain things you can do, but it becomes very difficult, very tough sledding, if you will, for the crew. And listen, this becomes a safety issue as well. There are safety requirements that all of these shows have to meet. There are OSHA requirements that say, hey, there are certain levels of safety that have to appear on this show, whether it has to do with your protective equipment that goes on your person, or for the lighting hands, or for the stage hands, or for the camera people, whatever it is. There are specific rules that they have to follow. Not to mention, each state has its own set. And since they are filming on location in Montana, there are additional rules that they have to come into compliance. So they don't really want to cancel the show, but it kind of seems untenable to go much more forward than the second half of this season. And so what has been floated, it's not confirmed, but several noteworthy news outlets have been running with this. Is that
go ahead?
It will be
all right. It will be all right.
It will be.
Right.
It just means that Yellowstone may not continue configured the way that we've become familiar with that particular universe. Here's what we mean by that. If Kevin Costner is to move on, and again, this is not set, nothing has been set, but my gut is it's probably going to happen, because once this comes out, it's really hard to walk it back. In addition, he's got another Western that he's working on right now, I believe with Morgan Freeman. So he's going to have attention other places. And look, good on him to be in his 60s and have this much attention. That's wonderful as an actor, as an actress at that point of their career. So he's kind of revitalized it. But now the talk is maybe we can bring on another A-list Hollywood person to help continue on the series. Maybe not the way that you think, but to kind of keep that story going. And hopefully, everything at the end of the day will turn out all right. Because they are looking to cast, apparently, according to the trades, Matthew McConaughey in the show, which I think would be fantastic. He did a really great job in True Detective. I know you were a big fan of that, his run on that. And I kid because, no, Earl, you didn't like it. But he got a lot of critical praise for the writing and for his performance in that. And so it's an option. He's open into negotiation. In fact, according to the trades, they are in active negotiations right now. Again, nothing has been confirmed, and they won't confirm it until they're ready to confirm it, if indeed that's the way they go. So, Earl, what do you think about the potential of Matthew McConaughey stepping into the Yellowstone universe? Can that work from a storytelling perspective? This outsider who's just being introduced to this, literally, what, 6 seasons into the show?
Yeah. Well, so Yellowstone, when you say Yellowstone, the first thing you think of is you think of Kevin Costner, because Kevin Costner has been the center of that universe, that Yellowstone universe. He's John Dutton, and he is John Dutton. So there's no question about recasting or anything like that. He's going to be John Dutton. There's nobody who can step in that shoes unless it's Josh Lucas in flashback scenes, who I love. Very good.
Right.
But so yeah, we know that because Yellowstone, the flagship show, is such a it is a John Dutton uh, series, that the series, as we know, would have to go through a metamorphosis. It would have to change, because you can't continue without Kevin Costner's John Dutton there, because he is the driving force as the patriarch of the Dutton family in that series. So you have to shift. Now, one of the scary things is when you edit for a TV series or movies, when you have a change in the lead, it's a very scary time period, because you don't know how well it's going to mesh. You don't know how the fans are going to respond. You don't know if the horse is going to kick them. You don't know what's going to happen. The horse being anything from co-stars to writers to, there might be they don't see eye to eye in which way the character is being driven. And as Matt McConaughey is a rather large star, A-lister, he could conceivably attempt to force his view on things onto the spinoff series if it was to occur. Now, obviously, you mentioned True Detective. I never really watched it. Didn't really grab me, but I have seen his other series, and from what I've seen, Matthew McConaughey doesn't force his will onto it. What he does, he's very much a chameleon, in that he becomes the role that he takes on. And so I don't foresee that being a problem for him, trying to force his will, because he is very laid back, all right, all right, but he's also a very good actor. He's got a lot of charisma, and that's something you're going to definitely need for somebody willing to step into Kevin Costner's shoes in Yellowstone. So again, none of this is exactly confirmed. None of it is 100%, but it leaves us with opportunities to go to if this does end up being Kevin Costner's final run to.
It's interesting. A couple of things you said, I want to dovetail off of that. I was thinking about this, last day or two when the news broke, and I'm like, I could actually see this working, and I'll tell you why I see it working. I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I'm going to give you a scenario here. Let's say John Dutton, that's Kevin Costner's character, were to suddenly pass away, whether of natural causes, or maybe somebody finally gets him, or maybe his heart gives out, because remember, the heart was kind of at the central issue when the series began. What if one of those things takes place? What would that franchise look like then? Well, let me give you some of my thoughts. Number one, Beth is now free of her father. She is free to do what she wants to do. She does not have to be beholden to the ranch or to protect it in some of the steps that he's had her take. Same thing applies to Rip. They are free to live their lives together. You have Casey, who would be probably the rightful heir, if not Jamie, which, gets a little muddy there. Could you move Casey and his wife and his son away? Go back to the reservation, be happy away from that place. Honestly, look, that place has taken a lot. out of that family. For all the emphasis on it, it's been a place of death and destruction for the family unit as a whole. But they're now free. You have Jamie. God help me, I do love me some Jamie. Played just beautifully. I believe it's Gil Birmingham that plays him, and he's just fantastic as the smarmy, sneaky, weaselly child. But could he see a reprieve before the end of the season because of some of his choices that have ticked off the Dutton family? Could you push him in a different direction? I'm not saying he gets away with every little bit of shenanigans he's ever done. Well, really, all of them have shenanigans that, they shouldn't get away with. But I could see where you could weave an interesting story there and then introduce a Matthew McConaughey character into the middle of it. It doesn't all have to be Yellowstone, who's going to get the ranch and how's that going to work. You could still tell a story out there within and around and with the Yellowstone ranch, but change the dynamic of the show to kind of release the characters into different directions. So I'm saying, so you're not rebooting the show. You're just literally 6 seasons in, taking a hard right or a hard left and saying, hey, we're going a different direction. Let's see how these characters would fit in this world post Kevin Costner, post John Dutton. And then I think the other thing is interesting is what about the reservation?
Well, I think what you're saying there is important is how you're going to balance introducing potentially a new leading man like McConaughey with the current supporting cast that they have. And Jamie Dutton is portrayed by, I believe, Wes Bentley.
Oh, Wes Bentley. Yeah. Gil Bingham is Chairman Rainwater. I got that incorrect. Sorry about that.
No problem. But yeah, so I mean, you would have to come up with a proper way to explain why they would leave their heritage. I mean, death and destruction, but it's also their home. So what catalyst other than their father dying would drive them to give up everything and let Yellowstone, let their brand, their ranch, their home potentially go to somebody who's unknown, which it's not necessarily, nothing's done yet. Matthew McConaughey may not necessarily be a stranger. He may be a Dutton that we haven't met.
That's a possibility. You know what? That is a possibility. And it may turn out that, hey, this does get walked back. That Kevin Costner's like, you know what? This isn't the legacy I want about me. Because, at a certain age, we all start looking at our legacy. What are we leaving behind? And maybe he decides, you know what? I'll push it for one more season, or at least to finish this one the way the writers intended for it to be. We don't really know how that's going to turn out. But I got to admit, for a show that occupies a very prominent place in pop culture right now, to me, it's actually elevated that franchise to even more discussion, more curiosity factor. You look in that at that overall, I hate to use the term universe, but that's kind of how we've been conditioned the last 14, 15 years with Marvel and different production studios trying to create universes. The Yellowstone universe is strong. They've got all of these sequels coming out. You've got the one coming out, is it Boss Root? I can't remember, which is based on the first African American law enforcement officer in the West. So that's going to be interesting as well. The franchise isn't going away. Yellowstone is still going to go on, even though it may not be Yellowstone proper, at least the way we've come to understand it. And so we didn't discuss this earlier, but it hits me. Can you think of a show that was that ingrained in pop culture and then just took a hard turn like this? I've got one in mind, and this is an old show. You're going to laugh at me, but MASH would be the first one that came to mind. The first 3 seasons, it was Alan Alda, Wayne Rogers, that's Hawkeye Pierce, Trapper John McIntyre, and Henry Blake, who was the commanding officer. Well, Henry Blake decides he doesn't want to do MASH anymore. You know what? They didn't tell anybody until they shot the final scene. They killed his character off screen.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden he's gone in the season finale, which was all about him going home. And then you come back for season 4. Not only is he gone, but Trapper John left while Hawkeye was in Japan.
Will Ferrell's real, by the way.
Yes, of course. So he's gone, and they never show him again in that fourth season as Hawkeye's trying to chase him down. And then it becomes from just a really wacky comedy to a dramedy when they add in Colonel Potter. They add in Mike Farrell, who would be BJ Honeycutt. And then they would do that again a little bit later, but not nearly as hard of a turn when they got rid of Frank Burns, who is an all-time great character. If you've never watched MASH, watch it for Frank, he's the person you love to hate and was one of the sweetest people in real life. That's usually the way it works. When they brought in Charles Emerson Winchester the third, played by the brilliant David Ogden Stiers. But that's the first one that I could think of that really just took a hard turn and went a completely different way. Can you think of anything else that was that pronounced once it's been kind of established?
See, I would argue with the MASH example because MASH went from, like you said, a comedy to a dramedy. It kind of with the passing of the torch, so to speak. Plus, you didn't get rid of Alan Alda, who was the head, albeit not necessarily as much as Kevin Costner is on Yellowstone, but he was still the leading character actor on the show.
He was.
Honestly, it gets difficult trying to think about this. You would have to go with some of the other longer running and also franchise affiliated shows like CSI, when you had Grissom leave the show, and you had who was it? Lawrence Fishburne came in first, and then later down the road, Danson, I believe.
You had Ted Danson on as well, yes.
And so, they were able to. That was the main character, the boss that rotated out, but you kept a lot of the supporting roles to help keep the fan base, because some of the fans love the lead character, but a lot of people want to for some of the supporting cast who are just as important in their opinion. Sure. And that's why I'm not sure you get rid of Beth, Casey, and Rip right off the bat, and Jamie as well, because you want to keep as much as the familiarity and as much as the heart of the show that kept it going while infusing it with the heart transplant, so to speak. So
good.
So I think the only ones I can really think of that have gotten away with it would be the larger franchise who have established themselves over years and years and years, like Law and Order, NCIS, CSI, all these that have done things like that. Just recently we had NCIS rotate from Mark Harmon to what's his name?
Gary Cole.
Thank you, Gary Cole, who's awesome, by the way.
Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. Nice to meet you.
I never thought I'd see him in a role like that, but he is awesome in the role. So, other than these longer procedural, episodic series that have been on and are part of larger franchises, this would be one of the few, and we don't know how well it's going to work. But as long as the fans stay and keep tuning in, Yellowstone will survive.
I was going through my head as you were talking, okay, what franchises have made major changes in cast? ER used to do that, right? Nobody remembers this one, but it had a competitor show for a while called Chicago Hope, which Mark Harmon was on, which Rocky Carroll, who plays Director Vance on NCIS, he was on that too. Funny how the world is very small in Hollywood. They turned over a ton of cast members. Those kind of ensemble shows tend to do that. Now we have the Law and Orders, which are, just underwent another transition with SVU, and there'll probably be more detectives come in and come out. But outside of that, it's really hard to remember one that deep in just said, you know what? Not, hey, somebody wanted to move on. No, we're moving on. Basically, and I don't. Andrew Lincoln, Walking Dead. We are going to talk about the Walking Dead a little bit tonight. So that's a pretty good example. And that really did make a hard turn when you went to more of a committee of actors and actresses to lead the show. I mean, eventually it morphed into basically Daryl and eventually Maggie. We can talk about the merits of that one day. I know you're not a Maggie person. The only other ones I could think of just off the top of my head, Sleepy Hollow did a little bit of that. I got a deep cut for you. How about Person of Interest?
Ooh.
Who shocked me in a particular episode, and the show did completely change. when that death occurred. And so some things like that are some possibilities, but I just feel like this one, because of its cultural impact, at least, if you ever go to Buc-ee's, which is just a fantastic convenience store, it's got four sets of restrooms in the store. That's how big it is. And they sell a lot of Beth Dutton gear. And by the way, when I say sell, I mean it's off the shelf. They're selling it because people really identify, I guess, with her character. It's going to be interesting to see how this works out. But I got to tell you, I'm even more excited for when those last few episodes do come back, when that second half of that season is actually released. I'm curious if their ratings won't go up even just a little bit more, just because of the curiosity factor. I mean, you gotta remember, they're on the Paramount Network on linear television, but they're also simulcasting that on all the other channels that they own. So it's a huge deal. We're going to see how it turns out. I don't know. This is just my opinion, and you can feel free to weigh in on it. If they need Kevin Costner's, and I know he just won a Golden Globe, right, for his performance as John Dutton. For the 80 people who vote on the Golden Globes, you know my feelings on that. I don't know that they need his star power anymore to make the show go. I mean, in 1923, in that series, they've got Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. And my apologies, my lady. They do a wonderful job with it. I really think they needed those two for what they're doing there. 1883, they didn't put as much emphasis on huge name talent. I mean, Sam Elliott, obviously, very, very talented. I'm fascinated by the Tim McGraw casting, him and Faith Hill. I thought they did really, really well. I know you haven't had a chance to watch it all the way through. I thought it went really well. So it's going to be interesting. How does Taylor Sheridan handle this? This is really, as far as I know, this is really the first crisis, at least publicly, that's been mentioned, that he's having to deal with as a content creator, as a writer, as a director, as an executive producer. We're going to see how he handles this. This is going to be very interesting going forward. So we will see. All right. Well, let's move on to our next topic, and that is Disney. We love to talk Disney here. We're Disney people. This week, Disney had their earnings call. Now, we're not going to break down the earnings calls for you. You can find that in other places. If you want a good review of that, I would go to the Valiant Renegade channel or WDW Pro. They do a fantastic job breaking those things down. We're big supporters of them. But there were some things that came out of the conference call yesterday that I thought were pretty interesting. We want to talk about just a few of those here real quickly. The first is, and Iger made a point of saying, we are giving creative ability back to the creators, a direct shot at Chapek, who created his own section that would be over all creative. Well, Iger's giving it back to the studios. Could be good, could be bad, depends on what your flavor, chocolate, vanilla, I don't care. But when he said that, he said as part of that, they were going to bring back some tentpole franchises and create some additional movies. First one he announced was Frozen 3, to which a loud cheer went up in the Lord's house because his oldest child, baby Cephas, if you will, very excited, huge fan of Frozen, knows all the words, all the songs, can sit there literally if it's on and just do what we would do with Star Wars: A New Hope, and just verbiage, just it would be flowing in the same time and just the same way they were doing it. So Frozen 3 is going to be released. There's a new one coming out. They also announced Toy Story number 5. Thought that was interesting. Toy Story 4 made money, but it seemed like there was a lot of pushback from the fan base that really wasn't the ending that they wanted. And that itself is already blown up with Tim Allen kind of saying goodbye to the character all of a sudden. I wonder if that's because they don't want him back, or who knows? Just things that pop up on Twitter. Twitter is a mess most of the time. So we can talk about Toy Story 5. And then the last one, which I think is interesting, is Zootopia 2. Now, we talked about Zootopia last week. Anyone who has seen that movie and does not laugh and smile when they go to the DMV and the sloth is in charge, then I just don't know what humor actually is. I really enjoyed, I know. I really enjoyed that particular movie, and the vocal cast was really, really good. they're going to make a number 2. So let's just take a look at these three for just a minute. Of these three, Frozen 3, Toy Story 5, Zootopia 2, do you have one that you're most interested in or most looking forward to? I think we all know which one's going to have the most impact financially when it's released, but do you have one you're looking forward to?
No, no. I just got over Let It Go in this house. I have a 7 and 8 year old that sing that song for the majority of their lives, and just when I thought it was gone, they're announcing a third one. Okay. Now my kids love all my kids actually love the first Frozen movie. The second one for them left. I actually managed to avoid watching this movie, and when they watched it, when I caught up with them, they were watching the first one again, and I was like, "I thought you were watching the second one." They're like, "No, we wanted to watch the good one." I was like, "Okay." So they were big fans of the first one. I've actually never seen the second one because they never revisited, which they probably watched the first Frozen movie once every month or two. So it haunts my dreams, and now they're saying they're coming back for a third one. Just when I thought it was going to let it go, but alas, no, it was not to be.
I see. So I see what you did there. Unfortunately, where we reside, it's only going to be in the 50s tonight, so we're not going to be able to build a snowman either in relation to this discussion. So since you skipped Frozen 2, spoiler alert, Elsa and Anna's grandfather was not a very good dude. All right, so got into a bit of a tussle. Yeah, I know, with the forest people, and may have done them a little bit dirty. Kind of the main crux of the whole second movie, and then Elsa growing into her powers a little bit more, elementally speaking. So it's going to be interesting. And by the way, Elementals is going to be one of the movies they announced as well, which will be a Pixar movie. So we'll have to see how that turns out as well. I already gave you my thoughts on Zootopia. Huge fan of that. I believe that.
What was it?
Go ahead.
Who was that? Shakira, that song that was the hit in Zootopia? Was that Shakira that sang that song?
I could Google it and find it. I could throw it in the Google machine and see. But I figure if you're Bob Iger and you're coming back into this, now a lot of people saw him as the savior of Disney when he came back. But after about a week or two, here come a bunch of negative articles from the press saying, he did some things that didn't really help Disney when he was there before. What's going to be different now? And so you got all this turmoil swirling around Disney, right? Disney Plus stagnant again, lost subscribers overall. Now, to be fair,
2.6 million subscribers. That's a number. I think 2.4 times what, $8?
What I thought was interesting is normally when they do these numbers, they give the percentages or they give the decimal place. They were just rounding up on this. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to make everything look the way it needs to. And I get it, marketing 101. But he's got a challenge in front of him. He's got people who would like seats on the board, perhaps potentially to cause a hostile takeover, although one of them that's kind of been settled earlier today. Again, you go look all that stuff up. The point is, Iger's under a lot of pressure to right this ship, so to speak. And so if you're going to lead, with tentpole franchises to turn your fortunes around, these are the ones you lean with, the ones that have a mass, not just this isn't a cult following. This is a massive built-in fan base, which means
Tim Allen announced that he was returning for Toy Story 5.
Well, I don't know, because when last I saw them, they were, they had that issue, because Andy didn't need them anymore. So I just assumed none of them would be coming back. Although, to be honest, if you really want the goodwill, and by the way, it's Toy Story 5. How long has it been since the Toy Story franchise debuted? 23 years? It was the early 2000s, wasn't it?
I think it was 99 maybe.
Okay. So you have that. You have a really wonderful place at Hollywood Studios, Disney Hollywood Studios. They have Toy Story Land. I love it. I've played at it. I enjoy it. Slinky Dog Dash is an excellent roller coaster to ride. I enjoy it quite a bit. I just wonder, though, the kids that grew up with Toy Story 5 now have kids. So does Toy Story 5 have the legs? Now, Frozen is a more recent franchise that seems very much ingrained in pop culture. I do wonder, though, at a certain point, how much can you wring out of some of these older franchises that you have? I know why you go back to them. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. In fact, I think that's smart business. But can
Toy
can you
Story
can
has
you revisit that well one too many times?
well, Toy Story has 4 movies and it's like what $3.5 billion.
Yeah.
Uh, Frozen with 2 movies, I think, with $1.5 billion. Zootopia was massive, hitting $1 billion all by itself.
Yep.
So I mean, these are franchises you want to hit. Now, to answer your question, Toy Story 1 came out in 1995.
Wow.
The second
So that's almost 30. We're coming up on 30 years.
years, yeah. And by the time it comes out, it will be 30 years.
Yeah.
But it's a proven, it's proven that it can make money. It's name recognition at this point. Toy
Right.
Story is a brand within, and so same thing with Zootopia and Frozen. You're going to make money off of it. Now, my question is: did he announce those to soften the blow? Because Disney talked about having 7,000 of their employees laid off. Was one of the things they were talking about, and
Yep.
they're estimating with that other things that they're going to cut $5.5 billion in costs. That's a lot of money. So if you can cut $5.5 billion and then potentially bring in $3 billion off of these 3 movies,
Mhm.
because they're big, is what they're
Sure.
doing. They're expecting and anticipating $1 billion a piece.
And
That's
his
what they're
and history shows that's a reasonable outcome.
potentially possible. And so another thing that was interesting was you were mentioning how they're talking about the new plan with Disney is letting the creators be a little bit more free with things, right?
Right.
Did that remind you of any former Marvel director that said something quite similar just a week or so ago?
I don't know whatever. I know, yeah. I can't think of the guy's name, and I can't remember whatever happened to him. I think he faded into obscurity. I think he's selling used DVDs out of the back of his Pinto now, on
Yep.
Santa Monica Boulevard. What I hear.
But yeah, so I found the similarities in those two announcements that are part of bigger announcements.
Mhm.
Interesting that both of these larger semi-large companies are leaning into allowing creators more creative freedom, and I think that's interesting that they're doing that. But I also think that's a good idea because if you're trying to control everything, unless you're Mr. Sheridan right now,
Right.
eventually things are.
And even him, it's going to be a struggle.
You can only come up with so many different original unique takes on things at one time before everything starts looking familiar. You get tired, you get worn out, you don't care anymore, so you have to lean on other creators, and I think doing that would be very very wise, but also you want to keep an eye on them still. You don't want to have you know a post sequel trilogy
Yeah.
problem we're not going to talk about, but makes me sad on the inside just mentioned. But
Well,
you need to, but you also need some creative freedom.
so, and it's interesting. They're going back to the well with these three because these three to this point have been bulletproof. I mean, we're gonna say that the Toy Story franchise is loosely based on what Lightyear was supposed to be, right? That's
Yeah,
the generalized idea. Lightyear did not do well. Turning Red was a failure from in the box office. Strange Worlds was there for like 10 minutes and it was gone. But they knew that one. They knew they buried that one on purpose. They knew it was a mess.
yeah, that
Even in Kanto, which everyone loves on Disney Plus, and apparently for reasons I still am not aware, we're not allowed to talk about some fella named Bruno, I believe it is.
don't do
That
it.
that
Do it.
was a failure in the box office. It found second life on Disney Plus, but
Yeah,
Disney Plus didn't make it any money. What happened is the merch that came with the second life has made Disney a tremendous amount of money, and so I understand why you're going with these tentpole franchises. As long as the goodwill is with the people, you're going to make money. And what does that mean? Do you have to do them the way you've done them previously? I think there's a level of familiarity and comfortability that comes with the characters being the way you've always known them to be. And so we'll see. Is this the time to introduce newer characters with the older ones? We saw that work in some sequel trilogy thing you were talking about with a very mixed bag of results. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. Now, there are a couple of other things that came up I thought were interesting as well. For example, in an entertainment sense, they're spinning off ESPN into its own division. What that simply means is from now on, when they have these conference calls, ESPN is going to have its own segment in the report. Now we're going to see how profitable is ESPN. Is it Sports Center? Is it First Take? Is it Get Up? Is it Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max, who are simulcast on ESPN2, ESPN News? That's their morning talk show. I don't think you're going to find that's the profitable level. Mike and Mike in the Morning, which was their morning show for 20 years, used to call that Mickey and Mickey in the Morning because they weren't controversial, they were family friendly, and this is what it was. And you know what? Their sponsorships, they made mounds of money. They've not really found a talk show that does that for them. And so we're going to see what makes ESPN the money. And I'm willing to bet here, having looked at the numbers and just doing some projections, it's your live sports content. That's where the money actually is. Because you know what? I can't watch it on DVR if I want to know if Alabama beat LSU on Saturday night on ESPN at a 7:00 kickoff from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I need to see that in real time. And so I think that's where we're going to see where the numbers actually are, because the rumor is, and I think this is probably true, ESPN would like to get more into the betting side of sports, but that gets kind of dicey when you're airing live programming, live sports. So we're going to see how that kind of shakes out. But I look forward to seeing where that goes as a sports guy. And my alma mater played tonight. The men's and women's basketball teams played. They both won, by the way. Shout out to them. But that's a really big deal for ESPN, is the live content. That's something that is going to be interesting going forward. Last thing on this, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and that's Disney Plus. Had another quarter. There were some struggles. They're pulling back their guidance. They're saying they want to be profitable by the end of 2024. But, let's slow our roll a little bit. Because you can't be hemorrhaging, $1.5 billion and make it and be profitable. It's just that's not how math works, right? So Disney Plus continues to struggle to find its footing, and they announced a bunch of different projects. I heard them. We'll talk about a couple of them here. One I'll just mention that I really enjoy with my kids. It's called Sulphur Springs, right? They're bringing it back for a season 3. It's a good little show. It's a little bit of time traveling, a little bit of supernatural stuff. It's just good stuff for the kids. So I enjoy that. That's coming back here in a couple of weeks. We know we have Mando season 3 coming back on Disney Plus. Remember, Disney Plus was launched on the back of The Mandalorian. That was their big thing. And then they incorporated WandaVision. And then it was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then it was Loki. And then you started seeing more content come out closer together. Those were really the first 3. And so there's still content to come, but Disney is still struggling with getting enough fresh content to compete with Netflix, who added 7 million subscribers in the last quarter. Disney did not. What is the secret? Because there's always something to watch, and there's always something coming out. Now, they do a terrible job of marketing it. You'd never know what's coming out or what's on. You can sit there for hours and just, scroll for what to watch and never find anything, but they have the content. So Disney Plus, they're still trying to work that out. And look, there's no easy answer to this. Because you know what? A lot of their stuff on Disney Plus is dead. Now, we've had this discussion on previous shows about HBO Max. Why are they taking stuff off? That's paid for. It's on there. Very simple. They license it out to other broadcasters, and then they make money off of a dead product that's not getting any views. I do wonder in the back of my mind, would Disney consider saying, we will license out Mandalorian season 1 to Tubi or or Fubo, make up your own thing, which technically is owned by Fox, so I guess it's owned by Disney. But would they license something like that out and say, you know what, pay us, $35 million and we'll let you air season 1 for 2 years or something like that? that's where Netflix makes a lot of money. That's where a lot of these companies make the money, and that's where Disney Plus does not, because they license everything in-house. So you're not getting that extra revenue that you used to get from saying, okay, Avengers Endgame's going on Netflix after 5 months of run in the box office. Now people are subscribing to Netflix. They want to see Endgame. Maybe they didn't see it when it first came out. Maybe they saw it a bunch of times and want to see it again. I'll have to subscribe for that. So it's interesting. The business model is very tough for them right now, and I want them to be successful. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm not sure that the foundation was set up right to be able to. Is it correctable?
Well, see,
Probably.
well, that's the interesting thing is we're going to see which one works because they're two completely different
Mhm.
ideas to running with. So we're either going to see one, licensing out some of your other finished product might be what keeps HBO going, or it could be that keeping everything in house, like what you said, Avengers Endgame on Netflix, you're going to go because you're going to watch it,
Mhm.
or you keep it in and make people come to Disney Plus. So
Right.
one of these two, I mean, they may both work enough to keep them going, but
Mhm.
I think we're going to see a for sure winner because eventually one of these are going to be making better, doing better than the other one, and the one who's losing is going to change their marketing strategy to
Mhm.
match. So we're going to see a clear cut winner. It just depends on how bad is it going to hurt the loser before they switch strategy, and will it be too late? Streaming wars is a thing.
Well, we'll hold that thought. We'll do this, and I'll touch on something. So don't let me forget when we come to that. Um, remember when Disney launched Disney Plus, they spent a lot of money, not just launching it, right, with infrastructure,
Yep.
streaming capabilities, with the Mandalorian. It got a little cheaper in season two. Let's be honest. That they were green screening the heck out of season two,
Yep.
but they spent a lot of money getting the stuff back because it had been licensed out to so many places. Heck,
Yep.
TNT had the Star Wars franchise, right? They had the original trilogy, they had the prequel trilogy, all locked up and ready to go. And so they had to buy the rights to that back. That cost a lot of money because it wasn't cheap to license it, and they weren't really super excited about getting rid of it. So you know what? As you were doing earlier on, pay me and we'll talk. Yep, and we'll talk just a little bit. So it's
That's
going to be
why
in it.
Disney's like we want X-Men and
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic Four back, but you know
Yep.
what? We're just gonna buy all the box.
One of the things that came out of that call, one last thing I want to talk about here, and then we'll go into our Star Wars portion, is that Iger kind of said, you know what, Hulu's up for sale if anybody's interested. If y'all got the money, we got the time, kind of thing. Are you? I'm just wondering from your perspective, do you think unloading Hulu onto someone else it could be a good decision for them because they've got a lot of programming they are exclusively on Hulu. That's ABC programming that is a Hulu exclusive. What do you think about the potential of a Hulu sale to somebody else?
Depends on how much they get for it. I mean, I think that has a large effect is how much are they going to win, how much are they going to make, but also when they when we were looking at the whole Hulu Disney Plus strategy way back when it first started, the idea was for Hulu to be the mature place for your Marvel and your things like that. So conceivably, when they had the option to get back to Netflix Marvel television shows, everybody thought you see Punisher and Daredevil. If they managed to make it over, they would be the
Mhm.
ones who would Hulu because it's a more mature, whereas Disney
Right.
Plus was originally supposed to be PG 13 for the brand. When you think of Disney, you think of the Disney Channel, you think of things like that. But with
Mhm.
the addition of parental controls and
Right.
parental lock on Disney Plus, it makes me think that maybe they're moving away from that because why would you add that if you're going to still continue with the strategy of putting your more mature content on Hulu? So maybe they're thinking about pulling all the content back to Disney Plus and letting Hulu go. But again, it depends on the money.
Because my understanding is they're on the hook to finish buying Hulu completely. That's a large capital outlay. So if you could
They have
dump,
to their stuff and find a buyer for them and get half of it. I believe is how it breaks down.
Well, the other thing is that you've got stuff on Hulu. What are the licensing agreements? Because you have to have those, even though they own the majority portion of Hulu, they still have license agreements. When do those licensing agreements expire? Do you have to buy them back, or are they like a 5-year deal? Oh my gosh, we're back in that same issue. We're having to spend money to buy things back. So the House of Mouse has its challenges quite a bit right now. How this ends, I don't know, but stay tuned. There's a lot that'll be coming up in the weeks and months to come. You had one other thing you wanted to add.
Yeah, before we move away from the House of Mouse, what is your thoughts about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur?
Okay, so that is a comic book series. It's only been around the last, decade or so. I've seen the comic books, actually really well drawn. I am a big fan of dinosaurs in comic books, specifically superheroes. So you go back to the Runaways. Did you see that series, the Hulu series? So I so there was that because it had a Gert in it. Who was the dinosaur that was sentient, that was their partner and ran with him. I thought that was cool. A little bit of CGI in a few episodes. She appears. It's for kids. I'm not worried about it. If kids like it, I'm happy. I might even catch a minute or two of it. I may or may not have watched Spidey and His Amazing Friends. It's not Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends from the 1979 to 1981 series on NBC, Spider-Man, Firestar, and Iceman, but it's still cute. I mean, it's kind of what it is. It's just cute. I mean, they did some Rocket and Groot shorts that have been on Disney Junior as well, which is a really good segue for we'll go to Disney Junior in just a moment. But you were talking about Hulu. I wrote these down. Obviously, Runaways was one of the series that they did. Hellstrom, which got absolutely zero traction. It was released and disappeared. It didn't go away. It's just nobody saw it. You had the MODOK series, which just didn't resonate with the fan base. The idea was to have Howard the Duck series, have all these characters together, and then instead of having the Defenders, you had the Offenders, which was the generalized idea. Never came to fruition, and I needed the Howard the Duck animated series, and I was jobbed out of it. We did not get that. Hit Monkey's a little bit different. It come back for season 2. They're going to New York. It is an animated series from Marvel. I warn you, if you see it on your Hulu and you have children in the room, don't watch it. It's not for. It is not. I repeat, not for little ones. I'm not sure it's for grown adults either. It's a little wackadoo, but so is the comic book upon which it's based. So it's loosely adapted, and by loosely I mean it ain't tied down at all. But it's still on it. That one is coming back for season 2. That one kind of found a bit of an audience there.
That's one of the reasons I asked about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, because it is an animated series now. It is a cartoon series that started on February 10th, 2023. It now has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is odd. So
it's review bombing, I say.
Well, everybody likes dinosaurs, so
I know I do.
So that's, but yeah. So Hit Girl. I apologize. Hit Monkey is definitely we
Not
just
sure what
transferred
kind of show you're watching, sir.
crossed over there. But yeah, Hit Monkey is definitely for adults, but it's a Marvel series again that we're saying is on Hulu. So it's following the old strategy of keeping the mature content off of Disney Plus. If that popped up on Disney Plus and it wasn't locked up by my parental code, I would not be happy. I would be raised dreading, because I watched the first 2 episodes more of a, what am I watching? I was like, what is this? It kind of way. It was like a train wreck with bodies.
A lot of them, actually.
And a monkey.
A lot of both in the first couple of episodes. Last thing I want to bring up here, and then we'll move on to Star Wars real quick. Iger talked about 11 of the top 15 movies, right? Talked about Avatar 2, and I'm smirking internally because I'm like, you don't own it. But you know what? Claim it. It's all you, brother. But you know what? You're not responsible for it. But I understand, to the person who buys it gets the spoils. And they're talking about, I know, and adding on more things at the Disney parks to coincide with more Avatar. Smart move. People like the Avatar stuff at Animal Kingdom in Orlando, and honestly, it's one of the lesser attracted parks that people just don't go to as much. Everyone wants the Magic Kingdom or Epcot, understandably, because they're bigger, have more things to do. But I expect you'll see, because they've got a lot of room off the backside of the Avatar Mountain to build more. So we'll see what they do with that. He talked about that. He did talk about Black Panther, which you and I can go back and forth about how much money did it really make versus how big of a hit it was. But we'll give him that one. So you got those two, and then he talked about on the streaming service. They really talked about The Simpsons, which blows me away. That's one of the highest rated or most watch hours you get on Disney Plus is The Simpsons, which, by the way, you can't do anything with because Universal Studios across the street, well, a little further up the street, actually, it's not across the street, owns all the rights to it. So you can't even use that in your parks. That's the same Universal that has rights to Captain America, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Storm, east of the Mississippi. You can't touch them. You can have them out in at Walt Disneyland out in California, but not on this side of the world. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's very telling that, The Simpsons, after 33, 34 years, are what we call an evergreen property. They're just popular no matter what time of year people buy their stuff. Speaking of evergreen properties, or some that are struggling to maintain their status as evergreen properties, let's go to Star Wars for a minute. We always like to talk about it. There were some leaks this week, rumors about a Star Wars franchise actually being in a movie theater. I had forgotten Star Wars was a movie franchise. I just thought it was a TV show on Disney Plus, but apparently it has been a movie series previously, and they're talking about coming back with another movie. And we won't go into too much detail because there's a lot of rumor and innuendo out there, but they're basically, the idea was in some form or fashion, bring back the character of Rey, whether that's in the Disney Plus series or in the live action movie. If you gun to my head, I think live action movie, because you're going to pay her a lot of money to come back and do that. You need something that's going to recoup that money. We'll talk about that in the weeks to come.
Has Daisy Ridley been doing anything since then?
Yeah, she's done a couple of independent movies really since then, but nothing like a huge Hollywood hit.
I mean, I'm not on her. It's other than Harrison Ford. It's kind of a curse. You had Mark Hamill. He had The Guyver. You had a few things that he did. You had Carrie Fisher, who maybe her biggest thing was When Harry Met Sally. She was one of the semi-supporting roles in that. I mean, and then you get to the prequel series. Hayden Christensen. I loved him in Life as a House with Kevin Kline, and he was in Acres with, I believe it was Idris Elba and a few others. But I mean, he didn't really do a whole lot unless you count him with Nicolas Cage swinging a sword. And I watched it because it was Nicolas Cage. Outcast, I think it was what it was called. But it was, it's a curse. It goes on. Then you go to the newer one. Where's John? How do you say his last name?
John Boyega.
Yeah, Boyega. I know he had a little bit going on before Star Wars.
But he's actually got a series I saw that has just dropped recently. I saw it tonight when Lady Cephas was flipping through one of the streaming services. He's got one out. Plays a military soldier. But you have Oscar Isaac, who did Moon Knight. He might have wished he stayed in hiding, but there you are.
Well, in his defense, he was also semi-known beforehand with the movies or whatnot. So I mean, he did have a bit of a stronger portfolio than Mark Hamill, Rick Ford, and Carrie Fisher did back in '77. And same with Daisy Ridley. She had a few things, but for the most part, she's the chick from Star Wars. So hopefully she continues. But I mean, is it really going to cost a whole lot more? And again, this isn't me throwing shade, but it'll cost more to bring back Oscar Isaacs than it's going to bring back Daisy Ridley. But Daisy Ridley's character is more of a central tenet and a force using Star Wars stories. So that might work out to the benefit of Disney.
Well, Disney will never admit it publicly. Employees that are former employees will come out and admit or say, yeah, they know there was a lot of divisiveness in the sequel trilogy. I do expect them to try and address that at some point because you know what? There's money on the table they're not getting from the Disney Plus series. Star Wars belongs in a movie theater. I'm sorry, but it does. You can have the smaller stories on Disney Plus, but it should be a big screen experience. And the rumors were, having her R2D2, Chewbacca, kind of trying to bridge the gap of the more popular Star Wars characters, kind of try to see if, hey, maybe we can heal some of these rifts and some of these wounds. And a movie like that would make money, but I still sit there and just go, why don't you just say, you know what? We've learned from the fans what they expect of us. Now you can't give the fans everything they want, right? Because then Lord knows where that'll go. But I think there's some conciliatory talk that you can put into writing that's really good marketing that says nothing, but it sounds like you said something. And maybe bring some healing to this. And speaking of healing, because we're in Star Wars, one of the things they're dropping here is the Young Jedi Adventures. Have you seen anything about the Young Jedi Adventures?
I've not seen anything about the Young Jedi Adventures. I've heard that there's going to be a Wookiee that's going to be in the series. Now, again, I don't know much about the series other than the little bit that we talked about earlier. But I do know, and I'm curious, they also have like the Young Jedi Academy, which was a book series, the Young Jedi Knights, where it followed the point of Padawans in Academy, and both the Luke Skywalker's Academy and also pre that in the prequel series academies. So as when I was a kid, as a fan of Star Wars, I read all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a market, there is a fandom there that they can check, both with the older people like me who read the stuff back in the day, who'd be curious to see how it translates, but also for the younger generation that if we're managing to grab any of the younger generation,
That's a good question.
that remains to be seen. In all honesty, what they need to keep. So, what do we know about it so far?
All right, so I'll read it to you directly. So the animated Lucasfilm series is set during the High Republic era and follows Jedi younglings as they study the ways of the Force, explore the galaxy, help citizens and creatures in need, and learn valuable skills needed to become Jedi along the way. I wonder if it covers not getting slaughtered in the Jedi Temple. The characters will be Master Yoda, who's very cute and very Grogu looking like, with Jedi younglings Kai, Liss, and Nubs, and their friends Nash and the droid RJ-83 on the planet Tanu.
Okay, so we're talking pre-old. We're talking not the old Republic that we knew from the prequel series, but the height around the Sith War, kind of.
Correct. Okay. And look, this is going on Disney X or not even Disney XD, Disney Junior, and it will be also available on Disney Plus as well. But that's kind of the target audience. I'll be honest with you, brilliant. You just said it. Will there be a younger generation? Well, you know what? The best place to start is when they're little, because if they grow up with it, they'll want more of it. When they hit teenagers, it's either cool or it's not, and it's probably not. So, I find that interesting. I think Disney made a good call there. I think that's exactly what you do. Remember the Muppet Show when I was little was a big thing. It was a weekly variety show, but at a certain point, it ran its course. But then all of a sudden, how about all of a sudden? Not sure what that was. On CBS on a Saturday morning, it became a thing called Muppet Babies, which kind of reinvigorated the franchise. Now they've tried it in different spurts throughout the time. They've tried to revitalize the Muppets, and it just hasn't worked. But again, go for the kids first, because you know what? When the kids are in the checkout line and they see something that's related to that branding, you have kids. So do I. Mommy, Daddy, I want that. No, you can't have it. No, I want it. All right, here, just shut up.
That's why I leave mine in the car with the windows up. I'm kidding.
I don't think you're allowed to say that on the call. All right, so that one's probably going to get us a strike. So I think that's interesting that they're going that route. I think it's very smart, actually, on their part. Yeah. All right, the last thing I have here is The Walking Dead. We promised we'd talk about that on the show. Specifically, I want to kind of look at Fear the Walking Dead just a little bit. It's going into season 8. It is its last season, and as part of that, it has only been renewed for 12 episodes. And so they're going to have to round up all those storylines into 12 episodes. Now, they released a still this week that Coleman Domingo, who plays Victor Strand, they had Ruben Blades, who plays Daniel Salazar, and they have Kim Dickens, who plays Madison Clark. First time they've all been together on set since season 3, I believe it was.
Yeah.
So that was a cool picture to see that. We're going to see how it goes. In the last season, ratings don't really matter as much. You know, that was kind of the thing with The Walking Dead is season 10, season 11, the ratings just didn't matter as much because they had gotten everything they were going to get. Sponsorships were what they were. That was not going to change. Now, we did see an increase in sponsorships during the finale, the 90-minute finale, but that's because it was a 90-minute finale, right? Ryan Reynolds went nuts advertising on that one, which they were hilarious, don't get me wrong. But so with the Fear of the Walking Dead being the final season, do you think they will effectively wrap everything up, or do you think they'll be a little bit like The Walking Dead, the parent franchise, is kind of like, well, there's some threads we're just not going to get to, so we're just going to ignore them. How do you see that the season possibly playing out? Do you think they're able to wrap it all up in 12 episodes? Or is it just, well, we'll just pick the most important things and the rest, well, the fans can debate it for years to come?
Well, I think the plus side with Fear the Walking Dead is that there were several points in the story where they pretty much had the reset button, and where with The Walking Dead, the mothership, they hit the reset button a few times, but they had so many people that had survived and continued and had more story, even if those characters died, the ripple effect continued in the stories, and they got much larger with their cast, with their societies than Fear the Walking Dead. So there was a lot more story to try to wrap up, with a lot more storylines, a lot more that people this went missing, that one went missing. There are hints that were left. So
Right.
in my opinion, more left with The Walking Dead than there is with Fear the Walking Dead. And the other thing with Fear the Walking Dead is we do know that there are 3 series that are, whatever you're going to call them. I think right now they're listed as miniseries, 1-season ordeals. Right now, they may become more. There's rumors that obviously the Daryl Dixon one and the one in New York, Isle of the Dead, or whatever it became after that, they
Right.
changed it.
It's now Dead City. Yeah.
So there's rumors that those 2 could potentially become legitimate series, but right now they're all still listed as 1-season engagements or miniseries. So does anybody in any of those other 3 series want anybody from Fear the Walking Dead to help pad? Do you not want them? Or do you have any storylines that you can finish, or give a satisfactory ending for one of those other miniseries? Will not answering certain questions make viewers tune in to one of these other 3 miniseries? I think that might be where you see where some of that is you may be left with a few lesser cliffhangers that will be answered and alluded to potentially in one of the other 3 series, which could conceivably make Fear the Walking Dead fans switch over and watch one of these other series that they may not be inclined to otherwise.
So Morgan joining Fear, they reset completely, right? They sort of tied the 2 together because he would talk about what had happened to him in Alexandria and with what was going on. He did a recording of it for posterity's sake. Then he talked about a king with a tiger, which people are just like, what's he been smoking? No, it was a real thing. With a pet tiger. Pouring one out for Shiva here tonight. So the showrunner specifically said when they took over the show, their goal was to reset it every year. I don't know if that's the best type of storytelling, because I feel like they're like, well, now this year we're going to do this. Why couldn't we just continue on with what we were doing? Which had been what The Walking Dead had done. The mothership had done. Hey, we have one linear story. Fear has chosen not to go that route. Some seasons with success, some, to each their own. we try to be a place of positivity, but I didn't enjoy it. I did it because, Lady Cephas watched it and I couldn't get up off the couch fast enough to get away or reach my phone. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I don't think the what is her name? Alicia Clark Debman, who was written out of the show in the last episode of last season. I don't anticipate she'll be back. So you're not going to get that resolution of her and her mother. And I think that's a shame that you never got them back on screen. We knew that the son had wanted off the show, and so he left in season 4. So they were never going to reshoot any future episodes because he wanted out. And so that's kind of tragic that you're not going to get to see that on screen. I would also argue this is from a personal standpoint. I'm upset that she never shared the screen with John Dory. If you're a fan of Deadwood, then you would understand why. Disappointing, but it's part of it. So it's going to be interesting what they do. They come back, I believe it's May 12th is when the first batch of episodes. They're going to do it like every other franchise does. They're going to do 6 episodes now, 6 episodes in the fall to finish out the season. And so we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how that ends up. I don't know that they take anybody from that universe and bring them back over. If anything, if it were me, and it's just what I would love to see them do, time jump them back to where The Walking Dead is. They're about 6 years behind, I think, of where The Walking Dead is time-wise. Time jump them, and I want to see Morgan walking up to Alexandria. He goes home. He goes home. I think that would be a good ending overall to tie it all together. I don't think, after not having the Rick and Michonne the way I said they needed to do it at the end of The Walking Dead finale, I just don't have any faith that Scott Gimble is actually listening to me when I talk anymore. So we'll see what the chief content creator actually has for the Walking Dead universe. All right, Earl, that's just about all that I have on our list this week. There was a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. Next week, we've got some interesting things. We've got Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania will drop next weekend. Same weekend that the Earl is doing our Combat One Wrestling podcast. We have some guests hopefully lined up for next week. Some fresh Realm of Reality episodes that you will get to see. We've got a lot going on. We can't wait to share it with you. Earl, any last thoughts before we drop off for the night and let people go about their lives?
The only last thought is a real quick one. The champion, the Lord, the King of the box office has fallen. We no longer have Big Smurfs running the roost at I think it was $2.17 billion last count that I saw. They fell over the weekend to not one but 2 different contenders who just entered the ring. The first being M. Night Shyamalan, Knock in the Woods or Knock in the Cabin.
Something like, yeah.
It was M. Night Shyamalan and Dave Bautista's new movie that they had coming out. Was one of the 2 that helped give the 1-2 punch. And what was the second? Lord Cephas?
I believe that was 80 for Brady, if I understood correctly. So yet again, Tom Brady is the GOAT, even in retirement, with his $345 million contract to be a color commentator on Fox starting next year. He's winning the box office too. My Lord, the man cannot be stopped. Also, Sally Field was in it too. But really, I'm just giving the credit to Tom Brady. No? Too soon.
Yeah, that'll be all that I want to throw out there. That extra was just the fall of the Big Spurs.
Well, I was willing to let it go and wrap it up for the night, but since you brought that up, I cannot let tonight go without referencing that in the 5th position for last week's box office was the BTS concert. That's right, the Bangtan Boys were back. They placed 5th in the box office returns. And so we're going to see this weekend, do they hold on to that 5th spot? Do they go up? Could they actually achieve 4th? We're going to see. I'm going to be there. The children's Cephas will be there as well because they've asked to go see the concert. So we may have some coverage on the site over the next couple of days. Maybe not, but we're going to see. Does BTS continue their hold at the box office? That will be very interesting for us to take a look at. All right. Well, our schedule is going to be very, very busy next week. We've got a lot of recording to do, but you're going to have content coming as often as possible. Again, we thank you so much for liking, for subscribing, for sharing this out on your social medias, whomever you follow, whatever you do, we appreciate that. And then go ahead and click that subscribe button if you would. Click the notification bell. That way you will get notified anytime we drop for any fresh content. The YouTube algorithm sometimes changes, but if you have that selected, hopefully it will get the information to you. All right. Well, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for leaving comments. Thank you for all that you do to help get this message out. We are greatly humbled and appreciate all of your support. We are going to wrap it up for tonight, but we will see you next week. On behalf of the Earl of Florida, I am simply the Lord Cephas. Good night, everybody.